Capital is abundant. Understanding is scarce. The Dynamo Show goes deep with the new industrialists rejuvenating industry and commerce. Brought to you by Dynamo Ventures. Learn more at dynamo.vc/podcast. Now, here's your host, Madelyn O'Farrell.
Hi, everybody, and welcome back to the Dynamo Show. I'm your host, Madelyn O'Farrell, and I'm excited to be joined today by Oana Jinga, Chief Commercial Officer and co-founder of Dexory Robotics. Oana, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks so much for having me.
Before we dive into Dexory and all of the things that you're working on, could you give us your background?
Sure. So it's interesting because I'm obviously a tech founder, but don't necessarily have a tech background, as many of us don't necessarily have that from the beginning. So I've kind of studied what I would call business altogether, so marketing, PR, and then management back in university, and then jumped into a tech career from that angle. So I worked initially in the telco world for Telefonica, like a big kind of global telco. And then I spent over 7 years at Google, working in different types of commercial functions, from partnerships, go-to-market, product marketing, partnerships. Yeah, quite a lot of different roles, all related to how you bring technology to market. So yeah, my journey has been a very traditional one around, like, I've got a technical degree and build a product, and then had to kind of figure out a way to take it to people. I co-founded the company with two others that were those technical minds, and my role has always been around how do we actually package that into something that people would pay money for at the end of the day.
Makes sense. And tell me a little bit more about kind of the insight from your prior roles that led you to Dexory.
Yeah, I think I've always been very passionate about technology. And at the end of the day, this is kind of what's driven me in what I do at Dexory, but also before, is trying to figure out what is, let's say, a problem that humanity has that can be solved with tech, and then figuring out what is the right tech to do that, and then pairing the two. I think when I was at Google, they had this kind of saying within the marketing team: know the user, know the magic, and connect the two. So that's kind of pretty much guided everything that I've done in my career, is really understand what drives the person, whether they're an enterprise user or obviously a consumer user. At the end of the day, we're all humans, and then we have kind of needs and wants, and whether that's related to an enterprise or a day-to-day life at home, it's still the same point. So really kind of understanding what that is, and then finding the best piece of technology that can help alleviate that or address that, and then finding a way to bring those two together. So I think that's kind of been the trend across my entire career so far.
Amazing. And tell us a little bit more about Dexory itself, what it is that you guys are building and what you're solving.
So Dexory is an intelligence platform for logistics and warehousing, which it sounds like a lot and very kind of fuzzy. But to put in very simple terms, we have a solution that monitors and scans and digitizes warehouse spaces, together with all the goods inside, all the racking and people and machinery and everything else that pretty much kind of drives a warehouse day to day. We digitize that in real time. And on top of that, we provide a lot of different features to make those warehouses just more efficient, to make them run better, help the teams inside obviously drive more for at the end of the day for profitability, and also kind of cut some of their costs. So the intelligence layer in itself is what we bring in, but it's backed by autonomous robots that collect data in these spaces and digitize everything, as I was saying earlier, robots that we make, from like the first designs of owning the full production line here in the UK and then deploy them around the world. But then also all the software on top of that, once we have the data from the robots, is what do we do with it, and how we, again, address those problems that our users have so that we can move them along their day-to-day much faster.
And my understanding is that Dexory really started as a retail shelf scanning solution before leaning into this warehouse automation component. And could you walk us through what that evolution really entailed?
Yeah, so it actually started as a home robotics solution over a decade ago. So when us three as founders got together, my other two co-founders, the guys got a 3D printer. This was like, probably about 2014. And they were working to make a little, I would say, security robot for the home. So a little camera on wheels that we kind of get to go from room to room and keep an eye on your house. Because at the time, and even right now, you only have static camera solutions, and you have to have one in every single room. usually pointed at an angle, and obviously like there's a lot of stuff that you're not covering. So at the time we were like, oh, maybe we can make something that's mobile and it can go around your house and obviously kind of keep an eye on everything from far away. So we started with that, like I said, many years ago, like over 12 years ago, and then quickly realized that in order to operate in home environments, you have to be able to deal with stairs and a lot of complexity, and plus the product in itself would have become extremely expensive and no one would have been able to afford it. So moved away from that into the B2B world quite quickly. And that's when kind of the whole retail area started. So we were pretty much doing what we do in warehouses, but inside retail stores, whether they're supermarkets or consumer electronics stores, having robots that would go around, digitize the goods, look at the shelves, flag if products are not there, but also look at what we call planograms, like are they put together in the right way, and report on all of that at scale. So yeah, that's where I would say it officially started to be a commercial product, but the initial journey was actually even further away, further back, with quite a lot of other ideas and attempts.
Totally makes sense. And you've made a pretty deliberate architectural bet, ground-based and tall versus drone-based and airborne. Could you tell us a little bit more about the argument for that approach?
Yeah, and I think when we got into the warehousing space, so we were working on the retail side, as I was saying a little bit earlier, and then the pandemic came. So we pretty much lost our customers in our market, I would say almost overnight, because obviously with the lockdowns, everything kind of went into limbo. But we never thought about, well, changing our idea or like doing something different. We kind of stuck with it, and we kept developing this autonomous solution that could pretty much kind of digitize the spaces at scale, very, very fast, and navigate through all the complexity of, like, when you're thinking about a retail store, you had like kids running around them, trolleys being pushed, right? So it's a very kind of dynamic space. So we kept building that throughout the first year of the pandemic. And that's when the retailers that we were working with in the front of house reached out to us to say, can you actually help us inside the warehouse? So we pretty much stumbled upon this use case for warehouse scanning and digitization, because with the pandemic, everyone realized they have no visibility of what they have in stock. They couldn't throw people at the problem because, of course, you couldn't get them in. And it all kind of turned quite chaotic because everyone was obviously buying online. So it was the first time that we found out that there's actually a need for this visibility and data collected from inside warehouses. Had to completely get our heads around that, shadowed people inside like distribution centers here in the UK, and then we're like, okay, this is kind of a very interesting problem to solve. So the problem kind of came to us, and then kind of going back to the point around like, yeah, finding the right solution for that problem. We realized there were a few kind of fundamental things that had to be done right. So number one, we had to be able to operate regardless of what's happening around us, so around people, machinery, goods moving. We couldn't really go to our customers and say, okay, now you have to stop all your operations because we're going to collect this data. So the idea was that we have to find a way to collect the data nonstop 24/7 in the background. And of course, with that, like being able to operate and navigate is one thing, but being safe for those people is also a very important kind of angle to it. And secondly, we had to be able to capture the data as quickly as possible so that we have this, what we call almost kind of real time reporting on exactly what's happening in the site. If you have gaps of like hours or even days, like, or already considering the velocity of the goods inside the warehouse, you're kind of losing that potential to really use that data in the right way. So with those two things, like operate around people safely and capture as much data as you can, that's how like we put them all together and came up with like, it has to be a ground-based robot that's super safe and easy to go around people, machinery, and everything else happening in a warehouse. And it has to be very tall and have sensors across the whole kind of height, so that we capture the whole rack top to bottom in one go. So it was kind of like driven by the problem in itself and the fact that, yeah, we do probably about 10 to 12,000 pallet locations an hour. It takes us a few hours to do a full wall-to-wall check, even for like million square feet. So like very, very big sites that we're in, which again means that what we build on top of with that data is as close to reality as possible. Because if you tell somebody this thing is not in this location, is in the other location, and they go to that place, and by that time it's already kind of moved again, obviously like that data becomes obsolete, because bad data is worse than no data.
Very fair. Dexory has a pretty impressive roster of enterprise accounts: Maersk, GXO, DHL. In your opinion, what does it take to actually sell to entities of this stature, especially when maybe they've been burned by over promising tech vendors before?
Yeah, and I think that's kind of the most interesting thing is if somebody has tried something in the past and they kind of label it as, oh, this is never going to work, that's the hardest one to turn around. It's actually a lot easier to go and sell a whole category of products to somebody who's never thought about it before than, yeah, kind of turning somebody's mind around. And I think you kind of nailed it there, because it has to work. Like the number one thing is like whatever you do really has to work, and it has to work well over and over and over again. So I think, yeah, the first customer that we got in was actually Maersk, because it's a massive global player in the logistics space, and of course supply chain, transportation, and everything else. So for them, it was very important that if we do come in and we bring something completely new in their sites, that had to bring a value as quickly as possible, and it had to kind of be able to replicate that day after day after day. So when we started working with them, they were looking, okay, how quickly can we get this data that you're collecting, and then also like, is it going to be accurate and reliable and scale? Literally, like we're talking about years of that continuous scanning, right? So number one is like, yeah, whatever, the moment you start selling to enterprise, you have to be as sure as you can that the technology definitely works. So normally I would encourage startups to start with smaller players, do your checks, kind of there'll be much kind of well, I'm saying this, it will depend a little bit like customer to customer, but usually they're a little bit more open to like making mistakes or like understanding that not everything is perfect. But the moment you go into the full-on enterprise space, it has to be perfect, because they're expecting that from every single supplier that they have, and they're used to being treated in that way. So yeah, number one, make sure it works, and then number two, make sure that you have the right infrastructure to support their demands, because similarly they're used to being treated by suppliers in a certain way, like white gloves. Obviously, they do put a lot of like big contracts through these suppliers. So having the support function there, like literally 24/7 access to like an engineer, or like if anyone has to go to site, have that like available very, very quickly. So all that infrastructure that support a customer has to be in quite early if you are to go for these big players.
Such a great point on the differing expectations. My understanding is Dexory uses a robotics-as-a-service model rather than selling kind of the equipment up front. Can you tell us a little bit more about how that works and what it takes to really make that work operationally?
Yeah, so we've always kind of going back to that point, like how do we make sure that this works in the environment? I think another interesting point that we got in the early discovery phases is that whatever we do has to be, we have to be able to get it in as quickly as possible, so kind of remove any big adoption challenges. And one of them was actually the purchasing itself. So if we were to go in and say you have to buy this expensive piece of machinery that you then own and somebody has to look after and then pass over all that responsibility to a customer, that is quite a big change versus what a lot of our customers do today, which is obviously look after warehouses and goods for other people rather than understand robotics. So it made quite a sense for us quite quickly that there's no point doing that handover of the goods. So there should be no transaction on the robot itself, because that's only going to delay us and it's going to delay the customer. And then from there, the subscription model comes in, because at the end of the day, what we sell is not the robots. What we sell is the data, and even more what you do with that data afterwards. So it's a lot closer to a SaaS type of product rather than it is to an automation buying. I think, yeah, it resonates very, very easily with our customers, because even if the robots are there and they're kind of capturing this data in the background, they don't interact with them, they don't touch the goods, they don't kind of move anything. So the product itself is not that piece of machinery, but it's the result of those scans, and again, what we do with them in the Dex review platform, which is all cloud-based. So I think it resonates quite easily with our users.
Amazing. You're based in London, but deploying across both the US and Europe, which are very different geographies in terms of their labor markets, their automation adoption. What are some of the biggest differences that you've seen?
Yeah, and I would say it's US and Europe and Australia and Middle East and Southeast Asia as of recent. And I think in the US, it's actually North America, because we do Canada and Mexico as well. So there's a lot of diversity in there. But what's interesting is, I mean, we've kind of thought global from day one. The type of industry that we work with and the type of customers that we have are global. So it's kind of natural. And we were hoping that this would happen, that once it kind of works quite well in a site, let's say here in the UK, they will want to take us all around the world where they have obviously kind of issues in their supply chain and in their warehouses. And that's happened very, very fast. So with Maersk, we're now deployed across countries, like all the names that you mentioned earlier, DHL, GXO, and so on. The way that we do it breaks down a little bit into the different teams, right? So because when it comes to commercial and driving that relationship, usually you kind of have a point of contact, you have a sponsor, which may be in Europe, maybe in the US, but that makes it a little bit easier to navigate the geographies, because versus other type of companies that might be, I don't know, like SaaS based, where you have to go into a market, you have to set up a team, you have to get an office, you have to start making sales from the bottoms up, you have to do your marketing. From our side, we come to the top already with a flagship customer and then start deploying from there. So it's a bit of a different kind of way in. And it does help, like having that one point of contact commercially at a company level that you then do all of that spread with, rather than having to work kind of geography by geography. But then the one point is like also the way we build the tech had to be very easy to ship anywhere in the world, had to be easy to deploy anywhere in the world. So we only need 2 of our deployment engineers, sometimes like even joke like 1.5, because like after the first couple of days, they can just be one person on site. And it only takes somewhere between 2 to 5 days to get up and running, installed, and already kind of bring that data in. So building that for this type of scale from the beginning was very important to us, rather than thinking like every single deployment is going to need 20 engineers. So you can't really send 20 people to Australia and get them to stay there for a month, right? Like it has to be quite seamless. So that was kind of another part, like the operations of deployment and getting our things up and running had to be super smooth, so they could do that all over the world. And then, of course, I mean, you start building those networks locally. We do a lot to get involved in like local associations, like local groups. And that network kind of starts building itself as you kind of come into the market.
Super interesting. Appreciate that. You've been pretty vocal about the ethics of robotics and the importance of unbiased AI. What does that actually mean, and how is that maybe reflected in some of the choices that Dexory has made?
Yeah, I think it's there's a lot of different angles to it. So and this is becoming a bigger and a bigger topic, I think, day after day. So if we start to break it down into the robotics angle, like of course there is an element of automation, like we automate that data capture side of things. We do it at a very different volume and a lot more information than a human can do, but we can't ignore the fact that yes, some people will not have to do some of the basic things that they were doing, which is going around and counting boxes. And you have to get them quite comfortable about that and explain very, very well, like, okay, this is what the technology is doing and this is how it's helping you and what you can kind of do with that free time. So we have that incorporated in our deployment process and the way we work with customers. Every time we go on site, we deploy something new. Our deployment engineers and our customer success teams like spend a lot of time with the team on the ground, literally anyone that might be interacting with a robot and explaining like why is it doing, what's it doing, why is it doing what it's doing, and what you can do after that with the information, so to make sure that they're as comfortable as possible with it. So that's kind of that angle a little bit in terms of like how we approach that with our customers. But then there's a bigger angle is like as we build the technology itself, our team is very diverse, like from a lot of different angles. It's quite an international team. Of course, like we've got a lot of gender diversity and like I said, a lot of other characteristics, but that is, again, a reflection of the type of users and customers that we have. Just like you were saying earlier, we are deployed across the world. We have a lot of instances where like people speak a completely different language than English when you actually go on site. So you have to be mindful around like, okay, what does that mean from the way they interact with the product? Like, have we kind of catered for them? Are we helping make their jobs easier or actually make it more complicated because they don't really understand what we're saying? So the team being diverse helps a lot to think about some of these practicalities, which you might not kind of consider from day one. But then when you go to a site and you realize, wait a second, no one on the site speaks English because they're like, either somewhere in Asia, or even if you think about France or Germany, you have to be able to address some of those particularities. And I think lastly, it just goes back to there are obviously like a lot of elements around how we train our models, how we segregate the data, like how we respect privacy and kind of the conditions as well that some of our customers have that, they don't want some of their data to be used in certain models. Like all of that is, again, going back a little bit to that ethical side of things, because we have to respect that and we have to understand that and create a guardrails for it. So that's always been part of our product strategy.
Amazing. That's super helpful. Last question for you. You've articulated a mission to transform supply chains into supply networks where they are connected, efficient, predictive. What does this space really look like in 5 years? And maybe what's a bottleneck that we'll have to overcome to get there?
Yeah, it's a great question. And I think we already have, because if I take a step back, when we initially launched, which is just under 3 years ago, 3 years ago, none of what Dexory does even existed, and now we work with like hundreds of like the big names around the world, and we have hundreds of sites deployed, which I think is testament of like, we must be doing something right that is scaling so quickly. But if I go back to the motions, like we initially started focusing a lot on the third-party logistics providers, your 3PLs, just due to the nature of like their business being quite complex and having to do a lot of reporting to their own customers. But then we started to meet their customers as we were on their sites. And then those customers also then started working with us directly or took us to other 3PLs in other markets that they were in. So we very quickly realized that we're actually connecting a lot of different logistics nodes or like logistics kind of steps for some of these brands, and opened up a lot of kind of new data and pretty much gave them visibility across their estates that they would have even had before, because they would have had to ask every 3PL and then to kind of get access to the systems, and sometimes country to country, like even internally, they would have had different teams and so on. So going back to that point around kind of creating this network, we're already very much doing that, and we have a lot of customers that are kind of adopting it at scale. And what I talk a lot about lately is this concept of distributed intelligence, which is like if you find something that works really, really well in one of your sites, how can you then get your entire estate to adopt it? How can you kind of feed that to the people on the other sides to help them understand, okay, you can make these improvements into your local scenarios that will then allow you to replicate these benefits that these guys are seeing here. So I don't know, like we work with the guys at Samsung, for instance, if we're seeing their Samsung site in Europe having a super interesting slotting strategy, how do we make that applicable to their site in Texas, let's say? Before you would have to take the guy from the UK site, take him into Texas, run a workshop for the team there, start kind of helping them figure out like what does that mean in their context. Whereas right now, with the visibility we offer, it's a click of a button to kind of transfer that from one to the other and already go into action. So what I'm getting to at is, I think, the main blocker is like the willingness of people to really kind of open their minds and use these insights. And also it's our responsibility as well to make it as simple as possible for them to access them. And then I think the moment people start to tap into that potential, then it grows really, really quickly, which is why we're seeing quite a lot of our customers keep expanding across their estates, because there's like this aha moment or like, oh, wait a second, I can now see across all of my estate, and I can connect all the different dots that before require so much manual work to bring together and so many different teams.
Amazing. Well, Oana, thank you so much for joining us. Thank you so much for all of your perspectives today. It was great to have you.
Thank you so much, Madelyn. Appreciate it.
And to our listeners, thank you as always for tuning in. We'll see you next time.
Thanks for listening. If you enjoyed this episode, leave us a 5-star review and tell us what you liked. And be sure to head over to podcast.dynamo.vc to keep up to date with our latest content, or subscribe on the podcast platform of your choice. Until next time.